She stacked stones under Wyoming's biting wind, unaware the cowboy watching carried a grave's weight in his heart. Each rock settled into place with a muted click, echoing loss and resolve across frost-crusted plains. Hannah Lowell lifted her husband's hammer, its oak handle smooth from his callous grip, and drove chisel into limestone. Dust drifted like memory in the biting air, each chip a prayer laid in mortar's cradle. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've got something extra special saved just for you. Hannah brushed sweat and dust from her brow, eyes tracing the cabin's rising wall. Mortar set in ragged seams, dark as pine-shadowed dusk. 2 years passed. Her husband fell to raiders' bullets. Grief had choked her tongue and turned her hands to empty grief. Now she built her home one stone at a time, hearth by hearth, to bury sorrow beneath solid walls. Each rock she hefted was an anchor to tomorrow's promise. The wind whispered through sagebrush, stirring tales of pioneers and broken dreams. Hannah paused, hammer in lap, and looked to distant ridges where storm clouds gathered like silent witnesses. She tucked a stray lock behind her ear and pressed her palm to the cool face of a limestone block. Her fingers traced the hammer's carved insignia, her husband's initials entwined with hers. In that contact, grief gave way to purpose. Each stone would stand when she could not. Samuel Creed reined his bay mare at the rim of the new homestead. He watched her work in silhouette against storm-darkened sky. Dust scoured his leather duster, and mud crusted his boots, but he held the reins with steady hands. Widow's work, he reckoned, stone by stone, grief by grief. He carried his own weight, dug grave for his wife and child after the fever took them. Since then, he wandered with the horizon as his only kin. He dismounted and approached, spurs silent on frost-hardened earth. At 20 yards he paused, tipping his hat without a word. Her hammer rose and fell, rhythm of resolve that sang to his hollowed heart. He set a small bundle on a stump. Pemmican jerky, hardtack wrapped in oilcloth and a trowel, its handle carved with an eagle's wing. He meant no intrusion, only a gesture kinship at day's end. Hannah did not look up. He cleared his throat. Wind stole his words. He stepped back, hands open. She nodded once, eyes never leaving her work. By afternoon's light, she placed a rock atop the wall's highest course and brushed mortar from her palms. She picked up the bundle, untied the oilcloth, and held the trowel at arm's length. The eagle's wing glinted like promise. She slipped it into her belt, silent thanks to the tool that might shape her walls. He tipped his hat again and rode off into the rim's hush. Hannah paused by the cabin's skeleton frame, wind biting through wool skirts. She tested the trowel, its balance familiar in her grip. She closed her eyes, tasting relief as sharp as a dagger's edge. She imagined her late husband's hands teaching her stone-laying. She felt a presence in the tool's carved confidence. With each stroke of the trowel, she spread mortar as if smoothing over grief's ragged edge. In the window's fading light, she caught a flicker of movement. Jake Miller's rider gliding atop a sorrel mare. The rancher's hard gaze measured her work, suspicion etched in every line. He halted, arms crossed. Hannah met his stare with steady calm. He tipped his hat without warmth. "Storm's coming," he said. "Hope you finish before it hits." His voice held a warning. A woman alone, building walls, drawing gossip like flies to honey. She nodded once, words caught in mortar's dry seams. He rode off, his silhouette swallowed by rolling dust. Hannah turned back to her work, hammer rising and falling, each blow a vow to her husband's memory and to her own freedom. Night came on sudden wings. Lightning split the sky. Thunder rumbled like distant hooves. Hannah laid the last stone of the day, chest heaving beneath linen and wool. She gathered tools, hammer, trowel, chisel, and brought them inside the half-built cabin. Lantern light glowed on frost-laden logs. Shadows danced across rough-hewn beams. She stacked stones by the hearth, ember light flickering in each crack. Then she draped the trowel and hammer across a mantel plank, symbols of her labor's beginning. Outside, wind lashed against logs. Snowflakes drifted through gaps in the shutters. Hannah pressed boards into place, battens creaking under winter's first fury. She knelt by a small cot, wool blanket folded, and laid her late husband's locket atop the pillow. Its silver shell caught the lantern's flame, a dove in flight, memory's silent talisman. Beyond the frosted window, Samuel Creed reined his mare at the tree line, lantern raised in greeting. He waited, shoulders stoic beneath dark coat. When she opened the door, snow crowned her hair like a fractured crown. He offered a canteen of hot chicory coffee. She accepted, lips trembling as warmth spread through her chest. He tipped his hat, words lost in gale. She nodded, turning to the hearth's glow as he melted back into the pine-scented night. Hannah stoked embers to crackling flame. The trowel's handle glowed in the lantern's hush. She cradled the coffee cup, eyes tracing curling steam in the lantern's halo. Memory stirred of laughter and lullabies, her husband's voice kissing her ear. She pressed her palm to the trowel's carved wing and felt kinship's pulse. Outside, the wind sighed like regret, snow gathering at door's base. She set the locket back on the cot, its dove poised for tomorrow's flight. Samuel watched from the woods, cold at his side, heart a knot of longing and regret. He remembered vows broken by fever's cruel hand. He watched the cabin's golden glow, sanctuary he could not claim. He touched the brim of his hat and turned toward camp, a shadow carrying hope's promise across frost-lashed plains. Dawn found Hannah at her wall's unfinished corner, hammer resting on her knee. The storm had passed, leaving snow-kissed ridges and wind-scoured sagebrush. She laid mortar for the day's first stone and paused at fresh tracks slipping across frost, a stranger's prints, too large for Samuel's spurs, too order for elk or deer. They led toward the cabin door, mixed with boot prints she did not know. Her pulse quickened, a letter pinned to her chisel. Ink blurred by snow, signature looped with an ominous flourish from a name she had hoped to bury. Hannah closed her hand around the letter's frigid fold, past secrets refusing to stay buried beneath stone and sorrow. She rose, hammer in hand, and mounted her wall's highest stone. Below, she saw Samuel Creed silently reining his mare at the wall's edge. He offered no words, only a nod that spoke of shared burdens and unspoken promises. She rolled the letter into her pocket. Grief's shadow ignited by cold truth. They stood together at her half-built homestead, widow and cowboy, hammer and spur, memory and hope. Beyond the wall, storm-whipped plains beckoned with threat and promise. In the hush before dawn's full light, Hannah raised her hammer high. Samuel lifted his Colt in silent guard. Together they faced the horizon's expanse, and the past that would not stay buried in Wyoming's wild heart. Snow fell heavier as the stranger's tracks vanished into the cabin's porch. Hannah's hand tightened around the letter. Samuel's stare pierced morning's haze. A distant whistle split the air, an echo of names best left unspoken, heralding the reckoning the wind would carry across frost-crusted plains. Hannah unfolded the letter under lantern's glow, its words clawing a past she'd buried beneath stone and sweat. Snow clung to her shawl's fringe as frost bit at her knuckles. By firelight, ink blurred with tears, your husband's killer claims these plains. Leave or watch your home burn. Her breath caught. 2 years of quiet resolve trembling on the edge of ruin. Dawn found Hannah at the cabin's doorstep, hammer and chisel poised above mortar. The letter slipped into her belt beside the trowel's carved wing. She lifted a chilled limestone block, set it against a rising wall, and pressed mortar between seams. Each motion was a vow. Grief would not unbind her labor. Across the hollow, Jake Miller reined his bay gelding. His spurs clicked like accusation. "Heard you've no right here," he said, voice rough as prairie wind. He dismounted and advanced onto frost-crusted earth. "Show me your deed." Hannah paused, hammer in hand. She wiped sweat from her brow, letting mortar slump free. "This is my land," she said, voice low as canyon floor. "My husband's will and the county seal speak true." Jake spat snow, County doesn't know half what Ezra Kane paid you to forget. Word as you claimed his claim. Cheap. He slapped the ledger strapped to his saddle horn. I'm here to see truth laid bare. Samuel Creed emerged from pines, rifle slung across his shoulder. He halted a pace behind Hannah, eyes steady as granite. Jake's gaze flicked to him. And you? Sam tipped his hat. I mean no harm. He set the rifle on the ground and reached into his coat. But this woman's claim stands. He produced a torn map, mortar-stained parchment showing her husband's territory line. He laid it on a flat stone. Saw this in the county's files. Jake bent to inspect the map, scowling. Forge. He lifted the hairpin from Hannah's belt. And this? Your family pin. Hannah stepped forward, steady as dawn's first light. My mother's gift. The initials matched the deed fragment. She pressed the trowel's carved handle toward Jake. A hidden inscription faint in the lantern's glow. My husband engraved the boundary here. Jake's eyes narrowed. He snatched the trowel and turned it this way and that. I'll be back with orders. He mounted and rode off, spurs ringing on ice. Hannah exhaled, shoulders slumping with the morning's weight. Sam knelt beside the wall and tested a loose stone, its mortar fractured. Someone had pried it free. Sabotage, he murmured. He laid the stone aside and inspected the gap. They'll return after dark. Hannah pressed her palm to the trowel's wing engraving, her husband's promise carved in oak. They'll break every stone before they claim a foot. Her voice trembled but did not break. She replaced the stone and smoothed mortar over its seam, fist pressed into wet cement. Sam rose, wind whipping his duster. I'll stand guard. He hefted the rifle and moved along the cabin's shadowed side, eyes scanning rim and ridge. Hannah returned to laying stones, each block a barrier against fear. At noon, she paused by the hearth, laying plans in smoldering embers. She drew the letter and read the final line. Your grief must feed the flames, as mine did. Her husband's murder, gunshot at dusk, had left her hollow. Now the killer's voice clawed from the page. She pressed her throat, tears blurring ink. Behind her, Sam gathered firewood, each log a shield against memory's cold. He set the pile by the hearth and patted Hannah's shoulder. She turned, eyes glistening. He offered a canteen of coffee, steam rising in a pale curl. She drank, warmth blooming in her chest. He watched rain-lashed sagebrush beyond the window, grief and hope mirrored in his gaze. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled a faded photograph, wife and child clasped in his arms, smiles frozen like song notes. He held it aloft, letting light trace their faces. Then he slipped it back among his papers, memory tucked away, but not forgotten. That evening, storm clouds gathered on wind-scoured ridges. Lightning forked above the cabin's peak. Hannah stoked embers to flame. Lanterns danced on logs, while Lila and Rose pressed close in woolen coats. She held the carved trowel in one hand, the letter folded in the other. A sharp rap rattled the shutters. Sam rose, rifle ready, and opened the door to reveal a stranger, tall, hat low, face hidden in rain's curtain. He held a sealed envelope stamped with Cheyenne seal. For Miss Lowell, he said, voice distant as thunder. Hannah accepted the envelope, fingers brushing the seal's ridge stamp. She turned back to the hearth. Sam and the daughters close. She broke the seal and read, Final hearing set at Cheyenne. Ezra Kane's appeal demands attendance within 3 days. Her breath caught. The letter swept away her sanctuary's hush. She folded the Cheyenne summons and tucked it into the trowel's handle. Rain hammered the doorway, storm's fury echoing the challenger's claim. Sam closed the door against wind and rain and laid the rifle across the mantel. He met Hannah's eyes, resolve mirrored in storm-darkened pools. Night fell in thunder's lullaby. Hannah returned to stone laying by lantern light, each strike of the hammer a vow against surrender. Sam watched from lantern's halo, coat in hand, heart stirred with a promise. He could not yet speak. Beyond Elk Ridge's cabin, storm-lashed plains held secrets in shadow and wind. In the hush before dawn, the valley exhaled. Old wounds would bleed under new trials, and only shared strength could bind fracture and fear. At the canyon's rim, hoofbeats thundered, Ezra Kane's riders cutting through rain-darkened sage. Their lanterns bobbed like specters in the storm, promise of reckoning riding on muddy hooves. Hoofbeats thundered through Wyoming's storm-lashed night, Ezra Kane's riders circling Hannah's stone sanctuary like wolves hungrily scenting blood. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the cabin's half-built wall, each block breathing mortar's promise, and then swallowing it in darkness. Within, Hannah Lowe pressed her palm against the cool chisel's handle, heart hammering beneath grief's old echo. Samuel Creed knelt at the rear window, rifle poised against wind scream. The map fragment, hidden in Hannah's locket, lay on the windowsill, her husband's boundary lines traced in faded ink. He memorized each contour, sworn in oak and silver, as the riders' lanterns bobbed closer. He rose, boots heavy with past guilt. He once failed to save his own wife and daughter from fever's grip. This time he would not fail. Outside, 3 riders reined to face the cabin door. Their leader, Crawford Bishop, dismounted and planted spurs into the packed earth. He spat snow. "Ezra Kane says you built on his claim," he growled. "Show us proof or clear out." His men leered, Winchester rifles taut against leather straps. Cold steel glinted beneath their oilcloth hoods. Hannah stepped onto the porch, hammer tucked into her belt. Mortar smeared her forearms. Her breath steamed in ragged puffs. She met Bishop's gaze. "My husband's deed stands. His name's carved on every stone you see." She held out the chisel. In its carved wing was stamped the deed's registration number, her final proof. Bishop's jaw clenched, surprise flickering behind dark eyes. Samuel appeared at the porch's far edge, Colt drawn and leveled. "Leave her be," he said, voice a low roar that rattled windows. The riders exchanged glances. Rifles wavered. He thought of Lila and Rose, his daughters staying with Mrs. Paxson on Coyote Flat. Girls he could not bear to lose again. He lowered the Colt, but did not holster it. This woman's claim is hers. Bishop spat into snow. Kane paid for this land and blood. He jabbed a gauntlet toward Hannah. "He owns every stone built in my name." His words dripped menace like winter frost. Hannah's fingers closed around the locket's chain. She drew it free and opened the silver shell. Beneath Jacob Lowell's signature lay a fold of parchment, a fragment of trail survey showing the homestead's true corners. She pressed it into Bishop's palm. "This map is witness enough." A rider lunged forward, fist cocked. Samuel's colt barked once into the earth. The rider yelped and stumbled back. Bishop snapped, "Enough?" He raised both hands. "We'll be back with Kane's writ." With that, the riders vaulted their mounts and vanished into the storm's howl. Snow fell thicker, plastering riders' tracks beneath drifts. Samuel lowered his colt, shoulders sagging with relief and fear. Hannah exhaled, leaning against the chinking of her labor. She pressed her forehead to the cool stone that would hold when flesh could not. Each block was her vow against injustice. Samuel joined her at the porch, breath mingling in the lantern's glow. "They'll return at dawn," he said. His knuckles whitened around the rifle's grip. "I'll stand guard." He gazed across the ridges, where wind scoured sagebrush bowed beneath winter's weight. "I swore I'd protect your home, whatever it costs." Inside, Hannah pulled Lila and Rose from the loft straw beds. The girl's eyes widened at shadows dancing across log walls. She draped her shawl over their shoulders, same shawl that sheltered them from storm and sorrow. She knelt and braided Lila's curls, each loop knotting safety around her neck. Rose pressed a hairpin into her mother's palm, a pledge of trust bound in oak and silver. Samuel built a fire against stone hearth, timber crackling like triumph. He set a bowl of pemmican stew before Hannah. The girls pressed close, each spoonful of balm for fear's bite. He watched the flames reflect in Hannah's eyes, strength forged from grief, hope rising in embers glow. Dawn found Samuel pacing the porch, rifle across his chest. He remembered his fevered vigil beside his wife's cot, the sting of failure searing his soul. Now he stood sentinel to another's loss, armed with remorse and resolve. His gaze drifted to the chisel carved with Jacob Lowell's initials, the shared tool of craft and claim, that lay on a stump. Hannah joined him, ghost of uncertainty in her posture. She held the Cheyenne summons, magistrates called to final hearing in 3 days. She tucked it into her pocket, heart tightening at the cost of travel. "I must go," she said, voice raw as wind across ridges. Samuel nodded, hands trembling around the rifle. "I'll ride with you." He thought of Lila and Rose, safe with Mrs. Paxson, faces he longed to shield from sorrow. Will face Cain together. His promise carried the weight of a vow sworn in bone and blood. Hannah placed a hand on his arm, nodding. She offered the trowel, its handle weathered by her husband's grip. He accepted it, pressing its carved wing against his palm, silent oath to stand by her side. Together, they turned toward the stable, each step binding them closer than any words. That afternoon, Samuel fetched the mail from the post, hardtack wrapped in oilcloth, letters sealed with friends' care. Among them lay a single sheet from Bitter Springs. "Ezra Cain will appear in court to contest your claim. Expect challenge at first light." Its edges curled with moisture, a promise carried by storm. Hannah's fingers brushed the letter's edge, heart lurching with remembered loss. She folded it into her locket shell, sacred hiding place for vow and threat. Outside, lightning forked across wind-scoured sky. Thunder rolled through Canyon's throat. They hurried to cabin, boots crunching in fresh drifts. Samuel dashed boards across windows, bracing shutters against winter's bite. Hannah stoked the hearth to blaze, embers hunting the dark. She laid stone by stone around the hearth's mouth, each block a testament to her fight for home and heart. As dusk draped the plains in indigo hush, a solitary rider emerged on the ridge. Ezra Cain himself, cloak flapping in gale. He reined at the cabin door, a single lantern swinging like judgment. Samuel and Hannah exchanged a glance, resolve flaring like torchlight. They stood at the threshold, hammer and rifle at the ready, each a shield for the other's sorrow. Cain's silhouette paused, lantern casting his gauntlet hand upon the snow. He tipped his hat. Beneath its brim, eyes glittered with vengeance. "Your claim ends tomorrow," he intoned, voice low as canyon stone. "Or I'll burn these stones to ash." Hannah stepped forward, shawl's fringe swirling like prayer flags. "You'll have to dig deeper than vengeance to break what I've built," she said, voice steady as mortar set. She pressed her palm to the chisel's handle, each carved line a boundary he could not cross. Cain spat snow and retraced the steps down the ridge, lantern swinging once before disappearing into storm's maw. Samuel exhaled, shoulders slumped with tension's release. He offered his arm to Hannah. She leaned against him, each heartbeat a silent vow. Within, the hearth glowed like promise. Hannah pulled the locket free, revealing the map fragment, her husband's final gift, a boundary hewn in love and law. She placed it beside the chisel and trowel, symbols of past and present entwined in her hands. Outside, the storm howled as if morning spilled flames. Samuel closed the door against Gale's assault, rifle laid across the mantel shelf. Hawk's calls drifted on wind's edge, warnings of dawn's reckoning. A crack sounded from the barn's corner, timber splitting beneath unseen force. Hannah and Samuel raced outside, lanterns blazing. Flames licked the haystack's edge, sparks dancing into night. The homestead stones glowed against firelight. Tomorrow's trial would rise from ashes or foundation strength. Flames roared through the barn's timbers, Hannah Lowell's stone sanctuary glowing under Wyoming's storm-racked sky. Ash drifted like memory across frostbitten ground as Samuel Creed wrenched open the cabin door and wrestled a hose from its hook. Lanterns swayed in gale, their light flickering on stone walls. He passed the hose to Hannah, hands trembling with urgency, and together they drove water into crackling rafters, each breath a prayer against ruin. Hannah's throat stung with smoke as she aimed the hose at a collapsing beam. The barn's blaze threatened to leap to 50 paces between outbuildings and homestead. She thought of her husband's laughter among these stones, his promise that a home could outlast grief. Now those stones glowed as if mocking her resolve. She knelt beside a smoldering bale of hay and found charcoal smeared on a broken board, lines of flammable oil traced with intent. Cain's sabotage was no accident. It was vengeance in size and ember and ash. Samuel knelt beside her, rifle slung over one shoulder. "They meant to burn you out," he said, voice muffled by wind's roar. He crushed ember under his boot and swept ashes from the oil-stained wood. "We'll rebuild stronger." His eyes darkened with the ghost of his own loss. Wife and daughter fell by fever's stealth 2 winters past. He pressed his palm against Hannah's shoulder, silent vow against injustice and fire's fury. Together they worked until dawn weakened the flames. Neighbors from Mrs. Paxson's ranch arrived, hauling water and tossing logs onto embers. Lila and Rose, Samuel's daughters, returned from safe harbor, presswool coats to Hannah's knees, eyes wide with frightened wonder. Rose brought her doll's bonnet. Lila draped the shawl across the barn's broken threshold as comfort's banner. Fire died to smoke and char. By mid-morning, the barn lay in smoldering ruin. Hannah swept the hearth's embers and propped twisted beams against stone walls, each charred log a testament to Cain's malice. She folded the Cheyenne summons into her pocket, resolve crystallizing like ice on sagebrush. The hearing loomed 3 days hence. There would be no turning back. Samuel loaded their supplies into the wagon. Blankets, the locket's map fragment, and the trowel's chisel with its hidden inscription of deed number cedar wrought in its handle. He tightened leather straps, each knot sealing his promise to stand by Hannah's side. He turned to the girls. "You'll stay with Mrs. Paxson until we return," he said. Lila's eyes brimmed. Rose clung to his coat. He knelt and pressed each child's cheek to the locket's shell, faced talisman against fear. "Be brave," he whispered. The journey to Cheyenne was a dim blur of wind-scoured hills and rain-slicked trails. Early snow dusted ridges and silver frost. Each hoofbeat plunged into slush. Samuel guided the mare with steady hands. Hannah sat beside him, shawl wrapped like armor, trowel tucked at her belt. At dusk, lamplights winked along dusty streets. The town's hush pressed against their arrival, Cheyenne's courthouse looming beneath lantern-lit eaves. Inside, oak benches creaked beneath townsfolk and travelers, miners trading gold dust, merchants in leather duster, ranchers with rifles at side. Sheriff Leary stood beside the judge's bench, star glinting like dawn's promise. He nodded to Samuel as Hannah stepped forward, chin lifted with quiet command. Ezra Cain sat to the judge's right, cloak drawn tight, eyes cold as winter clay. Judge Randolph cleared his throat. "We hear Ezra Cain's final appeal on claim to the Lowell homestead." He gestured to Cain. "Read your case." Cain rose, voice oiled with false courtesy. He unfurled forged deeds, wax seals cracked by haste, and recited terms of a debt settled in blood. His words slithered through the hall, chilling as frostbite. Hannah stood, eyes alight with sorrow's fire. She produced a map fragment from her locket and laid it on the bench. She drew the trowel's chisel from her belt and pressed its handle's carved numbers against the paper. "This number stamps each deed recorded by my father's hand," she said, voice resonant as canyons call. She traced boundary lines with callous fingertip. Cain's deeds burn in fire. This oak-inscribed trowel endures. Each spectator leaned forward as Lila and Rose peeked from Samuel's side, hope shining in their gaze. Sheriff Leary stepped forward. "I witnessed the barn's blaze. Cain's rider set it alight to bend the claim. Ash and oil mark his guilt." He placed a smear of char on the clerk's desk. Law must follow truth, not threats. His star gleamed in the hush. Judge Randolph studied the evidence by lantern glow. He rapped his gavel. "Ezra Cain, your appeal is dismissed. The deed stands under Lowell's name. You are barred from these plains. Depart within 48 hours or face contempt." He stacked Kane's deed beside the map fragment and chisel. Her home is her own. Gasps rippled through the hall. Kane's lips thinned. He glared at Hannah, then staggered back into shadows. His parting vow echoed hollow as wind in empty corral. "I'll see you answered in Silverton's court." The judge pounded the gavel as Kane's threat dissolved into echo. Outside, snow fluttered in silent applause. Hannah exhaled, shawl slipping from her shoulders. Samuel offered his arm. She wrapped her fingers around his wrist, a silent promise renewed. Lila and Rose sprang forward, pressing petals of joy around their mother's knees. Mrs. Paxson emerged with hot stew and fresh bread, her apron dusted in flour. Neighbors approached, miners shaking hands, ranchers slapping shoulders, each gesture stoning community's repair. That night, Samuel and Hannah returned to Elk Ridge by lamplit wagon. The barn lay black against frost-dusted plains. They halted at the broken threshold. Embers still glowed in charred beams. Samuel dismounted and crossed to Hannah's side. He gathered her into his arms, shawl draping them both. Her head rested against his chest. Each breath a note of tempered hope. Hannah traced the chisel's carved numbers with a trembling hand. "We have the deed number," she said, voice soft as drifted snow. "No court can claim what's ours." She pressed the trowel to her heart. Samuel exhaled. Wind scour resolve steeped in memory's ache. "I won't let them burn this down again." His promise braced the night silence. In the hush before dawn, a single hoofbeat broke the cold. Hannah and Samuel unhitched the mare. Together they crossed the threshold. Hannah placed a trowel upon her mantle, its carved handle catching the stove's glow. She draped the shawl across his shoulders. No words were needed. Embers of trust warmed the cabin's hearth. Outside, a messenger arrived by lamp-carried dusk, bearing a telegram sealed with Cheyenne's governor's crest. Silverton hearing set. Ezra Kane files final countiff. Letter enclosed. Hannah's breath caught as she read the typed words. Kane's vow pursued justice into every court-threatened sunrise's peace. Samuel closed the storm-beaten door against midnight's chill. He pressed the telegram seal between his palm and his heart. A vow to stand by Hannah through every trial. As wind scoured the frost-lashed plains, flames flickered on the horizon. Campfire glowed beyond the ridge. Dawn would bring Silverton's final test, and only stone and resolve could hold against the coming siege. A shadow slipped across the ridge's crest, horse and rider silhouetted against dawn's pale edge. The rider paused, hat low, lantern dim. The valley exhaled. The final reckoning rode on weary spurs toward Elk Ridge's trembling hearth. A rider's lantern pierced Wyoming's frost-laced dawn. Hannah Stone's sanctuary standing firm against Kane's final claim. Frost glimmered on sagebrush. Wind scoured ridges. Samuel Creed reined his mare at Elk Ridge's porch as a rider approached. Deputy Baxter, star pinned to his chest, breath rising in pale plumes. Baxter dismounted and handed Hannah a sealed writ. Silverton hearing today. Kane's final appeal will be heard at noon. His gaze was steady, carrying the weight of all frontier law. Hannah's palm brushed the locket at her throat, a silver shell hiding map fragment and her husband's hidden letter, proof of Kane's murderous betrayal. She slid the writ into the locket's hollow and pressed the clasp. Each heartbeat echoed her husband's parting promise. Outside, snow crystals sparkled like witness to her vow. This land was her own. Samuel led the mare from the barn's ruined frame, scarred timbers mended by winter's work crew. He gathered Lila and Rose from Mrs. Paxson's cabin, their cheeks pink with cold, shawls draped like wings. The girls' eyes brightened at their father's arms. He kissed each forehead, 2 promises, safety in return. The trail to Silverton wound through wind-scarred plains. Snow shifted in drifts that caught hoofbeats like prayers. Pemmican and hardtack wrapped in oilcloth sustained them. Samuel guided the wagon over rutted tracks. Hannah sat beside him, shawl folded across her knees, trowel at her side. Its carved handle bore the deed number cedar wrought beneath her husband's initials. Final evidence she would offer. At Silverton's dusty courthouse, lanterns glowed through frosted windows. A handful of ranchers and merchants filed onto benches. Miners paused at the door's edge. Judge McAllister presided beneath fur-lined coat and severe stare. Kane sat to one side, his ledger and forged deeds stacked like weapons. Sheriff Leary stood behind Hannah, star glinting with promise. Hannah rose, map fragment and letter in hand. She opened the locket. It shelled a gate to truth, and withdrew her husband's scrawled confession. Cain betrayed us. He murdered for land. She pressed the folded letter against the map's boundary lines. Each spectator leaned forward as she recited her husband's last words, voice steady as bedrock. He claimed to forgive debt, then shot me to seize our claim. This letter proved his guilt and the deed's rightful ownership. Cain's jaw tightened. The ledger trembled in his grip. The judge rapped the bench. "Present your deed number, Miss Lowell." Samuel produced a trowel from his coat, placing it on the bench. He rotated the handle's carved numbers into view. "This number stamps every deed filed in Washakie County," he said, voice carrying his own grief. Fever took his wife and child, leaving him debt to protect what remained of family. I witnessed Cain burn my ledger to hide deeds that bound him to fever-racked promises. A hush settled as Judge McAllister compared the number and seal. He pounded his gavel. "Ezra Cain's claim is dismissed. Lowell's deed stands valid. Cain is ordered from Wyoming territory within 48 hours. Cain rose, spurs clinking like bitter tears. He met Hannah's gaze, then lowered his head and retreated through dawn's pale glow. His final threat fell silent among snow-dusted ridges. Justice had claimed him at last. Outside, snow drifted through Silverton streets like blessing. Hannah closed her eyes and inhaled winter's hush. She passed her shawl to Samuel. He wrapped it around her shoulders. Wolves embraced a silent vow. Lila and Rose ran to meet her, wreathing their mother in laughter's warmth. Neighbors emerged, ranch hands, merchants, even Jake Miller, each offering gnawed and carved tool, stone by stone building her community. Samuel guided the family to the wagon, the locket and trowel stowed safe in his coat. He lifted Lila onto the seat, then Rose, then Hannah, each life he held tethered to hope's new horizon. Back at Elk Ridge, twilight spilled across Snow-Kissed Corral. Neighbors gathered. Mrs. Paxson bearing stew, miners hefting beams, ranchers with nails and leather straps. Samuel stoked the barn's hearth. Lanterns glowed on stone walls as hammers rang like renewal's anthem. Hannah paced the foundation. Each stone laid stronger than before, each seam bound with mortar's promise. Lila and Rose pressed petals of pine boughs between planks. Spring's first blossoms against winter's end. Samuel set the trowel on the mantel, its carved handle tracing hope into the hearth's glow. He drew Hannah into his arms, her head resting on his chest where heartbeats echoed home. She placed a locket around his neck, its hidden letter and map fragment reclaimed at last. He pressed his cheek to the silver shell, each breath a benediction. Weeks folded into months. The barn's timbers were raised anew, logs square by hand, rafters secured with rawhide lash. Sagebrush bent to plow's furrow, seedlings pressed green against thawing earth. Hannah guided Lila in seed planting, each row a testament to patience. Rose scattered water at the trough, each splash a promise of growth. Samuel repaired the corral fence, each nail driven with care. He paused at the trowel's resting place and polished its handle, oak warmed by memory's hand. He thought of his wife's lullaby and promised Lila and Rose a father's steadfast watch. Hannah joined him, each resting of hands a shared vow. One autumn eve, the family gathered by the barn's hearthlit window. Snow drifted on distant plains like lullabies. Hannah pressed her palm to the locket shell, its silence a chorus of triumph. She drew the hidden letter and repinned it inside the chisel's handle, her husband's promise carved anew in oak. She pressed it into Samuel's palm. His eyes glistened with rain-soft reassurance. Lila and Rose knelt before their mother, each tying a ribbon from Hannah's shawl to the barn's post, vows of many colors fluttering in twilight's hush. Samuel lifted them both into his arms, each heartbeat a new promise. Under Wyoming's boundless sky, Hannah stood at the cabin's corner, hammer raised high. Mortar and memory melded in each strike, each block a testament to life's enduring law. Samuel watched from the porch, cold at rest, heart unburdened by past shadow. He tipped his hat, and Hannah returned the gesture, a dance of trust without words. As dawn's first light traced frost-dripped ridges, the homestead exhaled its blessing. Neighbors waved from field and fence line. Horses nickered at barn gates. Lanterns glowed like captured suns. In the hush of stone and sky, Hannah and Samuel exchanged a final unspoken vow. This home, built one stone at a time, would cradle their family's hope for every tomorrow.